What happens when a man gives a woman his whole world, his savings, his inheritance, his future, and she walks away with another man without looking back? This is not a story about revenge. It's about something far more powerful. Stay with me. If you believe that kindness is never wasted, hit that like button, subscribe, and let's begin. Some people love with their whole chest. No conditions. No calculations. Just pure, open-hearted giving. Kofi was that kind of man. He grew up in a small apartment on the outskirts of Lyon, France, the kind of neighborhood where nobody was rich, but everybody knew your name. When his father fell ill during his teenage years, Kofi quietly dropped out of school, rolled up his sleeves, and taught himself mechanics from borrowed books and YouTube videos. By his mid-20s, he had a small but steady garage on Rue des Acacias. It wasn't glamorous, but it was his. That's where his story really begins. He met Celeste at a mutual friends gathering one autumn evening. She was studying medicine at a prestigious university in the city, sharp, elegant, the kind of woman who walked into a room and rearranged it without trying. Kofi was quieter. He smelled of engine oil and spoke carefully, like every word mattered. They were different in almost every way. And yet something clicked. In the early days, they were beautiful together. They'd share late dinners at cheap bistros, laugh about nothing, dream about everything. Celeste talked about becoming a specialist. Kofi talked about expanding the garage, maybe hiring 2 or 3 guys from the neighborhood. Their dreams didn't match perfectly, but they fit together like puzzle pieces from different boxes that somehow still connected. Kofi sacrificed quietly. Always quietly. He worked longer hours. He took on the most difficult repairs without complaint. He saved every euro he could to make sure Celeste had everything she needed: textbooks, transport, food, rent when things got tight. He never made her feel like a burden. He never kept score. When Celeste was accepted into an exclusive private medical specialization program, one that carried a price tag that made Kofi's stomach drop, she told him the scholarship hadn't come through. He didn't hesitate. He sold the small plot of land in the Burgundy countryside that his father had left him. The only thing his father had ever given him. He signed the papers on a Tuesday morning, transferred the money, and came home that evening wearing a smile. He believed he was building their future. He didn't know he was funding her exit. The signs came slowly. Fewer calls. Shorter messages. A growing discomfort with his garage, his clothes, his hands. She stopped visiting Rue des Acacias. She preferred the wine bars near the university now, the ones where people wore blazers and talked about symposiums. Still, Kofi held on. She's under pressure, he told himself. This is just a difficult season. One evening, she texted to say she needed to see him in person. His heart lifted. He thought, finally. Good news. She's finished. We can start planning. He set up a small table in the garage courtyard. A white cloth. A candle. A pot of his mother's rice recipe. A modest bottle of rose. And in his jacket pocket, a simple silver ring. Not expensive, but chosen carefully, because he meant every word it represented. He stood there in the cool Lyon night, nervous and hopeful, waiting for the woman he was ready to spend his life with. And when she arrived, she didn't come alone. He had planned everything perfectly. A small table in the courtyard of his garage. 2 plastic chairs. A warm plate of food. A cheap bottle of wine he'd been saving for weeks. And in his front pocket, a simple silver ring. Nothing fancy, but it meant everything to him. Kofi stood there that evening, heart racing, hands clean for once, wearing the best shirt he owned. He had rehearsed what he was going to say 100 times. He was going to ask Celeste to marry him. He believed, truly believed, that after all they had been through, after every sacrifice, every late night, every franc he had stretched beyond its limit, that this was their moment. The beginning of everything. She arrived. But she did not come alone. A man walked beside her. Older. Well-dressed. The kind of man who had never once smelled of engine oil. He stood with his hands in his pockets, barely looking at Kofi. As if Kofi were furniture. As if Kofi were nothing. Celeste didn't even say hello. She spoke quickly, quietly, like she was reading from a script she had rehearsed on the drive over. She was leaving him. She had found someone else, a senior hospital director. She was moving forward. She had grown. And she thanked him. She actually thanked him. The way you thank a waiter before you leave the restaurant. Kofi stood there, the ring still in his pocket, the food still warm on the table.
He wanted to speak.
He opened his mouth. But what do you say when the person you built your entire future around looks through you like glass? She turned and walked away. The man followed. Neither of them looked back. That night, Kofi sat alone in the dark garage for hours. The second chair stayed empty. The wine went untouched. He didn't cry, not yet. He just sat there, very still, like a man trying to understand a language he had never been taught. The weeks that followed were brutal. He stopped opening the garage. The shutters stayed down. Debts knocked louder than customers ever had. He stopped answering his phone. He stopped eating properly. He stopped being Kofi. Eventually, the garage was gone. Then the apartment. Then everything. He ended up on the streets of Lyon, walking the same city he had once hustled in with pride, now invisible to it. He slept on benches near the market. He ate when strangers were generous. His hands, which had fixed hundreds of engines, now carried nothing but a plastic bag with a worn t-shirt and a folded birth certificate he kept like a prayer. People who once knew him looked away. And then one gray morning, in a queue outside a community food distribution center, a voice called his name. He turned around slowly, half expecting it to be no one. It was Bastien, an old man, a former client. Years ago, when Bastien had no money to pay for his repairs, Kofi had fixed his van anyway and sent him home with a warm meal from his own plate. He had never asked for anything in return. Bastien looked at him, at the beard, the hollow eyes, the broken posture, and didn't flinch. He simply said,
"Come.
I know somewhere you can be useful again." Kofi had nothing left to lose. So he followed. He didn't know it yet, but that single act of kindness he had shown a stranger years ago had just saved his life. Bastien brought him to a small NGO operating out of a converted warehouse in the south of France, an organization dedicated to bringing solar energy to rural communities that the government had long forgotten. It wasn't glamorous. The pay was barely enough. The work was physical and technical and humbling, but it was something. And for a man who had lost everything, something was everything. Kofi knew nothing about solar panels or electrical circuits, but he knew how to learn. He knew how to watch, how to listen, how to ask questions without pride getting in the way. Every evening, while the rest of the team rested, he sat with the senior technicians, studying diagrams by lamplight, asking questions, taking notes in a small notebook he bought with his first week's pay. He made mistakes, crossed wires, wrong connections, miscalculated voltages. But every mistake taught him something. And slowly, week by week, the errors became fewer. The team began to notice. They began to trust him. And then they began to respect him. There was one afternoon he would never forget. He had just finished installing a solar lighting system in a tiny village school about an hour outside Montpellier. The children had gathered to watch, wide-eyed and curious. As he packed up his tools, a small girl, no older than 7, tugged gently at his sleeve. She looked up at him with the most serious expression he had ever seen on a child's face and said quietly, "Monsieur, because of you, I can read at night now." He had to turn away so she wouldn't see his face break. In that moment, something shifted permanently inside him. He was no longer just a broken man trying to survive. He was someone who mattered. Someone whose hands, these same hands that Celeste had once called rough and embarrassing, were now lighting up the darkness for children who deserved a future. He enrolled in an accelerated certification program for renewable energy technicians. He studied during the day and worked in the evenings. He had no laptop. He used the NGO's shared computer after hours. He had no quiet room. He studied in a storage space with a single overhead bulb. 2 years later, he passed his certification with distinction. The panel of examiners noted his practical knowledge was exceptional, far beyond what the coursework alone could have produced. Bastien cried when he heard the results. Kofi simply nodded, folded the certificate carefully, and placed it beside the old birth certificate he had carried since his darkest days. 2 documents. One that proved he existed. One that proved he had risen. He was eventually appointed lead technician on a major project, electrifying 16 rural health clinics across 3 regions in southern and central France.
He had a team under him now.
A salary. A small but clean apartment. A life that was his, built entirely with his own hands, his own tears, his own stubborn refusal to disappear. He didn't have a flashy social media presence. No LinkedIn announcements. No Instagram posts. Those who worked with him simply knew, if Kofi said it would be done, it would be done. His word was currency. And it never lost its value. Then came the conference. A major clean energy summit in Paris. Kofi was invited as a featured speaker, one of the emerging voices in community-based solar solutions. He almost declined. Paris meant the past. Paris meant memories he had carefully folded away. But he went. And it was there, walking through the exhibition hall, that he saw a name on a digital billboard near the entrance, a name attached to a scandal that had been consuming the French medical world for weeks. Dr. Celeste Arnault. Her private clinic had collapsed under the weight of a catastrophic scandal. Multiple patients had died due to negligent care. Her business partner, the distinguished hospital director she had left Kofi for, had quietly transferred his assets and vanished to another country, leaving her to face everything alone. Investigations had been opened. Families were filing suits. The media were ravenous. The woman who had walked away from a plastic chair and a warm plate of food into the arms of a man she believed was her future, had been abandoned in exactly the same way she had once abandoned someone else. Kofi read the headline once. Then he set his phone face down on the table and went to prepare for his presentation. He felt no satisfaction, no anger, not even sadness. Just a quiet, distant recognition, the way you feel when you remember a storm that nearly destroyed you but didn't. What he did not know, what no one knew yet, was the twist still waiting to unfold. Celeste, desperate and alone, had tried to find legal representation for months. Firm after firm turned her away. The case was too public, too damaging, too risky. She was running out of options and out of time. Finally, a colleague referred her to a young attorney in Lyon, quiet, principled, known for taking impossible cases. His name was Theo Marchand. She walked into his office and told him everything. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then he looked at her steadily and asked, "Do you remember a mechanic? A man named Kofi? He had a small garage near the East Market in Lyon about 10 years ago." She froze. Theo continued, his voice calm and unhurried. "When I was 17, I was caught stealing from a neighbor's car. Everyone in the neighborhood knew. My family was ashamed. I thought my life was already written, that I was already the person they thought I was." Kofi was the only adult who didn't look at me like I was garbage. He sat with me for 2 hours. He didn't lecture me. He just told me that the story wasn't over yet. He gave me work at his garage on weekends. He paid me fairly. He showed me what integrity looked like, not in words, but in how he lived every single day. He is the reason I became a lawyer. He is the reason I believe that even broken people deserve a defense. He paused. Then he added softly, "I will take your case. But not for you. For the balance, because he taught me that everyone deserves a fair chance, even those who didn't offer one." Celeste could not speak. She stared at the desk between them, the weight of 10 years pressing down on her chest like stone. The verdict came after 8 weeks. She was found guilty of institutional negligence. She avoided prison. Theo's defense had been precise and strategic, but the consequences were severe. A 10-year suspension from medical practice, substantial financial penalties, mandatory community service, and something no court could officially sentence her to, but delivered anyway, reputation. Her name was now synonymous with the scandal. She could not walk into a pharmacy without being recognized. She sold her car. She gave up her apartment. She moved into a small studio on a quiet street, took the bus, bought groceries late at night when the shops were nearly empty. The galas, the conferences, the designer clothes, the professional photographs, all of it belonged to a woman who no longer existed. One afternoon, she heard about the Paris Clean Energy Conference. She saw his company name listed among the exhibitors. She stood in her small kitchen holding her phone, reading his name over and over. She went. She didn't know why exactly. She just went. She slipped in through a side entrance, wearing plain clothes, a visitor's badge, her hair pulled back. She moved quietly through the hall, staying close to the walls, watching. And then she saw him. He was standing before a group of young students, gesturing at a scale model of a solar installation, laughing at something one of them had said.
He looked older, yes.
But there was something around him, a stillness, a gravity, that she had never seen in him before. He wasn't performing. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was simply present. Fully, completely present. She watched him for a long time from across the room. And then, as if he sensed something, he looked up. Their eyes met. He recognized her immediately. She could tell. But his face did not change. There was no flash of anger, no smile of satisfaction, no awkwardness, no pain. Just a calm, level gaze, the look of a man who had already made his peace with every chapter of his story, including her. He held her eyes for just a moment. Then he turned back to his students and continued speaking. That was all. No words. No confrontation. No dramatic scene. Just a man, fully absorbed in the life he had built, with no empty space left in it for bitterness. She turned and walked out of the conference hall alone. On the street outside, she didn't cry. She just walked, slowly, without direction, through the city that had once felt like it belonged to her. And somewhere in that long, quiet walk, she finally understood. She had left a man at a table set for two, a man with rough hands and a simple ring, and a heart so wide it had no ceiling. She had traded his kindness for status. She had chosen a title over a soul. And the man she had discarded had gone on to light up schools, heal communities, shape young minds, and do it all without ever once looking back at her in anger. He had not won by defeating her. He had won by outgrowing her, quietly, completely, and with extraordinary grace. Some people will leave you in the dark thinking they're chasing the light. Let them go. Because the right ones, the ones who stay, the ones who show up, the ones who give without keeping score, they don't just survive the darkness. They learn how to generate their own light. And one day, the whole world will see it.